I first noticed her on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, the kind of cool, quiet day where the neighborhood felt frozen in its own routine. Kids rode bikes, sprinklers ticked across manicured lawns, and the older residents sat on porches with glasses of iced tea. Everything looked normal, ordinary, predictable, except for her. My neighbor, Elaine stood in her front garden trimming rose bushes with slow, delicate movements. Her long silver hair, tied in a low braid, swayed gently against her pale green sweater. She always dressed the same way: faded cardigans, ankle-length skirts, soft earth-toned colors that looked like they belonged to a different decade entirely. But that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was her face. She had the kind of beauty that reminded you of old film actresses: fine jawlines, soft cheeks, bright eyes, but somehow untouched by time. When she looked up from her roses and waved at me, her skin looked too smooth, too perfect. Not a wrinkle in sight, not even the faint tiredness that hangs under the eyes of someone who's lived a full adult life. At first, I brushed it off as excellent genetics, moisturizer, maybe a little cosmetic work. Nothing unbelievable. People age differently. I knew that. But later that day, I found something that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't explain. I was cleaning out the hall closet, pulling out old folders, expired warranties, random papers my mom left behind when she downsized. At the bottom of the pile was an old 3-ring binder labeled Maple Street Neighborhood Directory, 1978. The cover was cracking. The pages smelled like mildew. Each page held scanned headshots of residents, along with their addresses and phone numbers. It must have been the first directory this street ever printed. Just curiosity, I told myself. It's harmless to look. I flipped through the pages, smiling at the vintage haircuts, the outdated glasses, the way everyone posed stiffly like they were at school picture day. The houses were the same, but the faces had changed dramatically. Some families had moved away. Some had passed on. Some I recognized from stories my parents told me. And then, I reached page 7. House 214, Elaine. My throat dried. The woman in the photo had long silver hair braided over one shoulder, pale green sweater, fine jawline, smooth skin, bright eyes, the same expression, the same posture, the same age. Not similar. Not she looks younger than she should. The exact same woman who waved at me just hours ago. The date on the directory glared back at me. 1978. I blinked hard, expecting some trick of the light or a fold in the paper to reveal a faint wrinkle or difference. But no, she was identical. Even the little mole under her left eye was in the exact same place. A wave of cold crept across my shoulders. I flipped back and forth between the pages, searching for typos, explanations, anything. Maybe it was a daughter, I thought. Maybe the original Elaine had a child who looked just like her. But no birth years were listed. No secondary family members. Just her name. One resident per household. One Elaine. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in on the directory image, comparing it to a picture I'd taken a few months ago of my neighbor's flower display. In the background, she stood watering her tulips. Same eyes. Same hair. Same impossibly youthful skin. I dropped the binder onto the floor as my pulse hammered painfully against my ribs. This wasn't right. This wasn't natural. But before my mind could spiral, a soft knock sounded at my front door. I flinched. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends always texted before they came over, and I lived alone. Every shadow in the hallway suddenly felt darker, thicker, as if the air itself was waiting. I stepped toward the door quietly, my socks gliding across the hardwood floor. I didn't open it, just peeked through the peephole. My heart nearly stopped. Elaine stood on my porch, hands folded politely in front of her, wearing the exact same pale green sweater from the directory photo. Her braid draped over her shoulder. Her expression calm, almost serene. Her eyes were fixed on my door, as if she knew I was watching. I held my breath. She tilted her head, just slightly, like she was listening to something behind me or sensing the air shift around me. The calm smile on her face didn't change. Then she raised a hand, slowly, gracefully, and knocked again. 3 perfectly spaced taps. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even dare breathe loud enough for her to hear. After a long moment, she stepped back from the door. Her eyes stayed on the wood the entire time, as if memorizing something about it. Then she turned and walked down my steps with her usual slow, old-fashioned elegance. I waited a full minute before unlocking the door. The porch was empty. The sidewalk was empty. The entire street felt eerily quiet. But something drew my eyes downward. A small piece of paper rested on my doormat. I picked it up with shaking fingers. It was yellowed, the edges brittle, the ink faded as if it had been printed decades ago. Across the top, in bold serif font, were the words, Maple Street Neighborhood Directory, 1978. And underneath, handwritten in neat, flawless cursive, Welcome to the neighborhood, Evelyn. My name. She wrote my name. But I had never told it to her. Not once. Not even in passing. My breathing quickened. I stepped back into the house, locked the door, bolted it, and pulled the curtains shut. In the silence of my living room, the ticking of the wall clock sounded deafening. My hands trembled as I set the paper down on the coffee table. Why would she have this? Why would she give it to me? Why did she knock as if she knew I had discovered something? I forced myself to look outside through a slit in the curtains. Elaine stood across the street in her yard again, trimming her roses as if nothing had happened. But then she paused, looked up, and met my eyes directly through the narrow opening. And she smiled. Slow. Knowing. Timeless. My breath hitched. Something was wrong with her. Something deeply, fundamentally wrong. And the worst part? She didn't look 40 years younger. She didn't look any age at all. She looked exactly the same. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the 1978 directory photo, or the way Elaine smiled at me through the curtain, as if she had known exactly what I would find. Part of me considered knocking on her door, asking her directly, demanding an explanation. But the rest of me, the part that still felt that cold prickle down my spine, kept me inside. I told myself I was overreacting. People age well. Photos fade. Coincidences happen. But the more I tried to normalize her, the stranger she seemed. It began with her schedule. I had always assumed she gardened during the day because I'd never actually seen her leave the property. But that week, I began noticing a pattern, one I hadn't recognized before. She only appeared after sunset. Every evening, right as the sky slid from orange to purple, her porch light flickered on, and she emerged from her front door with quiet precision. Sometimes she tended to her roses. Sometimes she paced slowly along her walkway as if listening for something. Sometimes she simply stood still, staring into the distance like she was waiting for a cue. But I never saw her in the daylight. Not once. The first night I noticed it, I tried watching from my living room window. But even from across the street, even through the glass, I felt the strange sense that she sensed me watching. She always turned her head slightly, like she were tracking the movement of my silhouette. I started pulling the curtains tighter. On the third night, something happened I still can't make sense of. I stepped into my kitchen to grab water, and as I crossed the room, I heard humming. Soft, nostalgic humming. A woman's voice tinged with static, like it was playing through an old speaker. The tune drifted faintly through my kitchen window. It was eerie in its sweetness, like a lullaby from a decade that no longer existed. I paused, listening. The melody tugged at something in the back of my mind, as if it belonged to a memory I didn't recognize. I switched off the lights and edged closer to the window. Outside, Elaine stood in her yard facing the streetlight, her head bowed, hands folded neatly in front of her. Her lips moved in perfect rhythm with the humming, but the sound seemed distorted, like it was being broadcast, not sung. A chill crawled beneath my skin. It didn't sound like a person humming. It sounded like an old radio transmission, warped, static-filled, distant. She hummed like she was remembering something from another time, or someone from another time. The next morning, I tried to distract myself by cleaning, working, drinking excessive amounts of coffee, scrolling through social media, anything to push the eerie humming out of my mind. But when evening came, dread settled over me like a cold blanket. And then I noticed something new. She avoided cameras. It started when I walked into my bedroom and saw my security cam notification blinking on my phone. The front door camera had detected motion. I opened the clip expecting a delivery driver or a stray cat. But the footage showed Elaine walking past my house. Except every time she neared the camera's field of view, her motion blurred. The image static glitched just enough to obscure her face. And then the moment she stepped out of frame, the picture returned to normal. I replayed it over and over. Every time the same distortion. It wasn't a malfunction. My camera had caught perfect footage all day. Neighbors walking dogs, cars passing by. But when Elaine walked past, the feed warped like the air around her bent light unnaturally. A shadow of unease crept deeper into me. I wanted to tell myself it was just a technical glitch. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard the humming again, this time coming through my bedroom wall. Except I didn't share a wall with her. Her house was across the street. I sat up, heartbeat racing, and pressed my ear against the drywall. The humming grew clearer, like someone was standing on the other side, singing through a layer of static. The melody drifted low and slow, familiar yet unsettling. I backed away from the wall and stared at it like it had betrayed me. That was impossible. There was no way I should have been able to hear her from that distance, let alone through walls. The next evening, I finally reached a point where curiosity and fear twisted together tight enough to push me to act. I needed answers. I waited until after dark, when she usually stepped out. I peered through the smallest gap in my curtains, watching her silhouetted figure cross her yard. She moved with that same slow grace, almost like a doll being guided by invisible wires. But then something happened that made my breath catch. She stopped walking, stopped humming, stopped moving entirely. She turned her head directly toward my window. Not the house, not the street, my window. Her face was shadowed, but I knew she was staring at me. I ducked back instinctively, heart pounding obnoxiously loud in my ears. A long moment passed in silence. I slid to the floor, my back against the wall, knees pulled tight to my chest. Eventually, curiosity overcame fear. I raised my head just enough to peek over the window ledge. The yard was empty. She was gone. But the night wasn't over. At around 2 a.m., I got up for water again. The hallway was dark and still, the only light a faint glow from a street lamp filtering through a corner of the window. I took a few steps toward the kitchen and froze. There were footprints in my hallway. Wet footprints. Small, delicate, and unmistakably feminine. I crouched down, my pulse roaring in my ears. The prints looked fresh, as if someone had walked through puddles or wet grass right before stepping inside. A trail of glistening droplets led from the front door toward the living room, where they vanished into the rug. But my front door was locked. Every window was locked. No alarms had gone off. My breath trembled as I approached the front door. My hand hovered over the bolt. Locked. I checked the windows. Secure. Every rational thought screamed that someone must have snuck in earlier. But no, there was something else, something stranger. The footprints weren't just wet. There were tiny flecks of pollen in them, and bits of grass, and fragments of crushed leaves. My mind flashed back to one thing the old directory mentioned. Neighborhood gardens tended by residents throughout the 70s. I thought of Elaine's humming, her nightly walks, her ageless face, her sudden appearance at my door. A knot tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just odd. This wasn't just creepy. It was impossible. And then I noticed something that pushed a cold wave through my blood. The footprints didn't come from the front door. They led toward it, as if someone had stood watching me while I slept, then walked out silently into the night. The storm knocked the power out around 9:14 p.m. I remember the exact time because the neighbor, the woman who never aged, always turned her porch light on at that hour. It was the only predictable thing about her. But that night, her porch stayed dark. I lit a few candles and checked the breaker, but everything in my unit was fine. The entire street was down. I texted the landlord, who replied instantly. Check the shared basement. Might be the main fuse. I didn't want to. The basement of our old duplex was already creepy on good days. Narrow steps, an echo that made it sound like someone else was coming down behind you, and that old metallic smell of rust and forgotten things. But the power was out, and I didn't want to spend the night in darkness pretending everything was normal, not after everything I'd noticed about her these last few weeks. So I took the flashlight from my kitchen drawer and headed downstairs. The basement that felt like a different decade. The moment I opened the basement door, cold air drifted up, unnaturally cold like a refrigerator left open. I took a deep breath and stepped down. My flashlight flickered slightly, even though the battery was new. The basement was split into two storage areas. Mine on the right, hers on the left. She kept her door locked for as long as I'd lived there. But tonight, her door was cracked open. Just a sliver. Just enough to see darkness behind it. I froze halfway across the basement floor. The storm rumbled loud above me, shaking the wooden floorboards. My own heartbeat felt louder. Maybe she forgot to close it? Maybe she was down here already? I listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No rustling. No breathing. Only the faint, eerie hum of wind slipping through the basement vents. I should have gone straight to the fuse box. But my eyes kept drifting to her door. My curiosity kept whispering. She hasn't aged in 40 years. Don't you want to know why? So, against every rational thought, I nudged the door open. Her room looked like 1978 froze inside it. The smell hit me first. Old paper, dust, and something faintly sweet like aged perfume. My flashlight swept across the room and I sucked in a breath. Everything was not vintage old, not antique old, but untouched since the late 1970s old. A metal frame bed with yellowed floral sheets. A wooden side table with a radio. One of those big, boxy models with a glowing dial. Stacks of newspapers tied with twine. A hatbox with faded stickers from airlines that didn't exist anymore. I felt like I'd stepped into a sealed time capsule. Then my light passed over something on the wall. Photographs. Dozens of them. All black and white. All slightly curled with age. And almost every photo showed her. Sometimes alone. Sometimes standing stiffly beside people dressed in 60s and 70s clothes. Sometimes in front of my duplex, looking exactly the same as she did now. No wrinkles. No changes. Same hair. Same expression. My knees felt weak. I swallowed hard and moved closer to the photos. The dates on the bottom corners were handwritten. 1972, 1974, 1977, 1979, 1980, 1981, 1981, 1981. The last three were all the same year. The year the house history said her obituary was printed. I stepped back, breath shallow. That's when I noticed something else in the corner. The radios shouldn't have been working. There were at least 10 radios, old wooden ones, metal ones, handheld ones, stacked neatly on shelves. And every single one was on. Not loud, not clear, but playing faint, overlapping whispers. A mix of static and voices. Old voices. War-era broadcasts. Traffic updates from decades ago. Weather reports referencing storms long past. The hairs on my arms lifted one by one. I moved toward the fuse box, trying to ignore the whispering radios. Then, a soft sound behind me. Don't look at me in this light. My heart stopped. I turned slowly. She was standing at the bottom of the basement stairs. Her silhouette outlined by a faint lightning flash from the window well. Her hair hanging straight and unmoving. Her clothes soaked from the rain. Her skin pale, paler than usual. Almost gray. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it filled the room with cold. "Turn that off," she said, pointing at my flashlight. I couldn't move. She took a step forward. "Please." The light, it shows things it shouldn't. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. "What are you doing down here?" I managed to ask. She tilted her head, slowly, like her neck joints creaked. "I live here." Lightning flashed again, illuminating her face fully. Her eyes, they weren't reflecting the light. They were absorbing it. Something deep inside me screamed to run. So I took a shaky step back, straight into her storage room. She frowned. "My things?" she said softly. "You shouldn't be in my things." I felt like a child caught in a stranger's house. "I was just looking for the fuse," I started. "There is no fuse," she whispered. Another lightning flash. This one long enough to see something on her cheek. Not skin. Not wrinkles. A thin, faint crack like porcelain. My blood turned to ice. She stepped closer. "Do you know how long I've lived here?" she asked. Her voice trembled, not with fear, with age, ancient age. I backed toward the door, but she moved faster than she should have, like she slid instead of walked. She raised a hand, and for a moment I thought she was reaching to grab me. But instead, she gently pushed the door closed. "Let's not ruin tonight," she whispered. "It's only just begun." I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop to check the fuse box. I didn't breathe until I slammed my apartment door and locked it twice. The radios were still whispering through the floor. I didn't sleep that night. And I knew one thing for certain now. My neighbor wasn't avoiding light out of shyness. She was avoiding it because light revealed what she truly was. I didn't plan on speaking to her that day. Honestly, I'd hoped to avoid her entirely. After what I saw in the basement, after hearing that voice right behind me telling me not to look at her in that light, I needed space. I needed rationality. I needed something that made sense. But the universe has a way of dragging you toward the things you try to escape. It was late afternoon when I saw her standing on her front steps, holding a stack of envelopes like she'd been waiting for someone to notice her. The sun hung low, bright and unforgiving, and yet she didn't seem bothered by it at all. Her pale skin looked almost reflective, like light didn't absorb into her but bounced off her. I was stupid to walk over, but fear does strange things to judgment. I needed answers even if I wasn't ready for the ones I'd get. She gave me a small smile as I approached. That same smile, too polite, too practiced, almost identical to every time I'd seen it for months. "Checking your mail?" I asked, forcing casualness, trying not to stare at her white-knuckled grip on the envelopes. "Just the usual," she replied softly. Her voice always sounded like it belonged to another era, gentle, poised, carrying an accent that didn't exist anymore. The silence stretched between us. I could feel her waiting, watching. She did that often. She let people speak first, like she was measuring them, deciding how much they deserved to know. "How long have you lived here?" I asked. It was meant to be a harmless question, a casual neighbor thing. People asked that all the time. But her head turned toward me very slowly, not startled, not confused, more like I'd just given her exactly the invitation she had been waiting for. She smiled. Not the polite smile. This one was different, wider, knowing. "Since before you were born," she said, "and long after you leave." The words were delivered so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that for a moment I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. But no, she meant it. A sharp chill crawled down my spine, like cold fingers dragging along each vertebra. I swallowed hard and tried to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat. "Ha! That's quite a way to avoid answering," I said, but my voice cracked in the middle. Her eyes didn't leave mine. "I'm not avoiding anything." The air felt thinner, heavy, like the whole street was listening. Did you grow up here?" I asked, trying again. She tilted her head. "I've been here through many families. Yours is not the first in that house, nor the second." My mouth went dry. A car drove past, but she didn't even glance at it. She kept her attention fixed entirely on me, like nothing else in the world existed. I cleared my throat. "So, you must have seen a lot of things change around here." "Yes," she replied. "Everything changes. Except me." Every part of me screamed to walk away. But I stayed. "I saw your name," I blurted out, "on an old neighborhood address list. From the 70s. Her smile never broke, but something in her eyes sharpened, like a blade sliding free from its sheath. "And did that scare you?" she asked softly. I hesitated. "Confused me," I said. "You looked exactly the same." She exhaled a breath that sounded almost pleased. "You pay attention. Most people don't." My stomach twisted. What does that mean? Instead of answering, she lifted the stack of envelopes slightly, revealing that every single one was blank. No stamps, no address, no writing, completely empty. "For someone who asks so many questions," she murmured, "you never look closely enough." I stared. "What are those for?" She smiled again. "Reminders." "Of what?" Her eyes drifted down the street to the houses, the trees, the silent windows watching from their frames, of how quickly people disappear. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't stay out there with her anymore. I forced a smile, muttered something about needing to get inside, and backed away. I didn't turn my back until I reached my front door. She stayed on her steps, watching. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. I locked the door behind me immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. I needed proof. Something concrete. Something real. Something that told me I wasn't losing my mind. So I grabbed my laptop and typed her address into every public record search I could access. Nothing. No recent property tax records. No registered owner. No tenant information. No digital footprint at all. It was like her identity had been erased completely. So I dug deeper. I searched the house history instead. That's when everything started to come together and fall apart at the same time. The earliest note I found was in a scanned newspaper archive from 1981. A headline from a local article. Local woman found deceased in her home. Investigation ongoing. The address was hers. The name was hers. Same spelling. Same age she still appeared to be. I felt sick. The article had a grainy photo. Old, black and white, faintly smudged. The woman in the photo looked exactly like her. The same soft waves of hair. The same serene expression. But the eyes looked dead. Empty. Yet the woman next door looked very much alive. I stared at the screen for so long my eyes burned. My heart pounded against my ribs loud enough I could hear it in my ears. Whoever she was, whatever she was not alive in any normal sense. A soft sound suddenly came from outside. Tap, tap, tap. At first I thought it was just a loose branch hitting the siding. But the taps were too rhythmic, too deliberate. I froze. Then I realized where the sound was coming from. The shared basement door. The one that connected both our units. I crept toward the window over the stairs and peeked through the blinds. She was standing at the bottom of the steps, face upturned, looking directly at the window where I stood. The last rays of sunlight hit her face, and for a split second, just one, her reflection in the glass didn't match her movements. Her lips curved into a smile that was far too wide, and she mouthed the words, "Curiosity ruins people." I stumbled back, knocking a picture frame off the wall. The crash echoed through the hallway, but the tapping stopped. Just silence. It suffocating. Something tells me she knew exactly what I found in those records. Something tells me she let me find it. And something tells me Part 5 won't be about understanding her. It'll be about surviving her. I stopped sleeping. Not by choice, by necessity. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the tapping. Rhythmic, patient. Coming from walls that shouldn't connect to her house but somehow did anyway. The newspaper article haunted me more than anything else. Local woman found deceased in her home. 1981. Her name. Her address. Her face. Identical to the woman who stood on her porch every night, trimming roses that never seemed to grow or die. Dead people don't water gardens. Dead people don't knock on doors. Dead people don't smile at you through windows and mouth warnings about curiosity. But Elaine Marrow did all of those things. For 3 days I avoided her. I kept my curtains drawn, my doors locked, my lights off after sunset. I ordered groceries online. I stopped checking the mail. I pretended the world outside my apartment didn't exist. But on the 4th night, she made it impossible to ignore her anymore. The invitation. It arrived just after midnight. I was sitting on my couch, laptop glowing in the darkness, scrolling through more archived records, searching for anything that explained what she was. That's when I heard it, a soft sound at my door. Not knocking, sliding, like paper slipping beneath a frame. My breath caught. I stared at the door for a long moment, watching the thin strip of light from the hallway cut across the hardwood. A shadow moved past, slow, deliberate, and then footsteps retreated down the stairs. I waited until the sound faded completely before approaching. A cream-colored envelope lay on my doormat, aged and slightly yellowed at the edges. My name was written across the front in perfect cursive, the same handwriting from the note she'd left weeks ago. Evelyn. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper felt wrong, too delicate, too old, like it might crumble if I gripped it too hard. I turned it over and saw a wax seal pressed into the back. Not a modern sticker. Real wax. Dark red, almost burgundy. The seal bore a simple design, a house with no doors. I broke it open. Inside was a single card, handwritten in that same elegant script. You've been so curious. It's only fair I show you the truth. Come to my house tonight at 2 a.m. The door will be open. Don't be late. Time doesn't wait for anyone. Except me. Yem. My pulse hammered in my throat. This was insane. This was a trap. This was exactly the kind of thing every horror movie warned you not to do. But I also knew, deep in the pit of my stomach, that ignoring this invitation wouldn't save me. She wasn't asking. She was informing. 2 a.m. I stood on my porch at 1:58 a.m., flashlight gripped tight in one hand, phone in the other with 911 pre-dialed. One tap and help would come. Or at least I hoped it would. The street was dead silent. No wind. No crickets. No distant hum of traffic. Just stillness, the kind that felt like the world was holding its breath. Across the street, Elaine's porch light flickered on. Right on time. Her front door stood open. Not cracked. Not slightly ajar. Wide open. The interior was completely dark. I forced my legs to move, crossing the empty street one slow step at a time. My shoes scraped against the asphalt, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. As I reached her walkway, the roses lining the path seemed taller than before. Fuller. Almost watching. I climbed the porch steps. The wood didn't creak. I stepped through the doorway, and everything changed. Inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air shifted, colder, heavier, thick with the scent of old perfume and mothballs and something else I couldn't name. Something ancient. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it twice and the beam steadied, revealing a narrow hallway lined with photographs. Dozens of them. Hundreds maybe. All black and white, all showing the same woman in different decades, different clothes, different backgrounds. But always the same face. Always the same ageless beauty. Always the same knowing smile. I moved deeper into the house, my footsteps muffled by a thick, dusty carpet. The walls felt closer than they should. The ceiling lower, like the house was shrinking around me. At the end of the hallway, a single door stood open, warm light spilling out. I stopped at the threshold and looked inside. It was the sitting room frozen in time, 1970s furniture, a rotary phone on a side table, a record player spinning silently without a record. And sitting in a high-backed chair facing away from me was Elaine. Her silver braid draped over the chair's edge. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Come in, Evelyn," she said softly. "You've waited long enough." I didn't move. "What are you?" I whispered. She tilted her head slightly, though she didn't turn around. "I'm what happens when someone refuses to leave." "You died," I said, voice shaking. "In 1981. I found the article." "I did," she agreed. "But dying and leaving are not the same thing." A chill crawled down my spine. "Then what are you now?" Finally she turned. Her face looked the same as always, smooth, ageless, beautiful, but her eyes were different. Darker. Deeper. Like they held decades of watching, waiting, existing in a space between life and death. "I'm a memory," she said simply. "A loop. A photograph that never fades. I stayed because I couldn't let go. And now, I can't leave even if I wanted to. Why are you showing me this?" She stood slowly, gracefully, and crossed the room toward me. I wanted to step back, but my legs wouldn't obey. She stopped inches away, studying my face like she was memorizing it. "Because you're like me," she whispered. "Curious, stubborn, afraid to let go of things that don't make sense. I'm nothing like you." She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Not yet." My breath hitched. "What does that mean?" She reached out, her fingers hovering just above my cheek, not touching, but close enough I could feel the cold radiating from her skin. "This house remembers everyone who lives here," she said softly. "And once it remembers you, it never forgets." I jerked back, heart pounding. "I'm leaving," I said. "I'm moving out. Tomorrow." Her smile didn't falter. "You can leave the house, Evelyn, but the house won't leave you." She stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Go ahead. Try." I didn't wait. I turned and ran through the hallway, past the photographs, out the open door and down the porch steps. I didn't stop until I was back inside my own apartment, door locked, every light blazing. I packed a bag that night. I called a friend. I booked a hotel. I left before sunrise. 3 months later. I'm writing this from a new apartment across town. Different neighborhood, different street, different everything. But it doesn't matter, because 2 weeks ago I started noticing something. In every photograph I take, there's a faint figure in the background. Too distant to make out clearly, too blurry to identify. But I know who it is. And last night I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. Same cream-colored paper. Same perfect cursive. Same message. "Welcome to your new neighborhood, Evelyn. I'll see you soon. Yam." I don't know how she found me. I don't know how she's following me. But I'm starting to understand what she meant. The house doesn't forget. And neither does she. Some neighbors you can't escape. Some neighbors are forever. And I think I'm becoming one of them. Which story kept you awake? Comment below. The end.